and welcome to another exciting episode of Retake League of Legends Edition. Now, we do have a sister show, so I do have to specify. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of Retake League of Legends Edition. Tonight we're going to be taking a look at the NA and EU LCS. We'll talk about the series that excited us most, teams that let us down, picks that we thought were interesting, and we're going to be making predictions for the coming week. My name is Alex Shinkari Erdenberger. I'm here joined today by Christian Saxby Jaleski, who is to my below. And to my right, we have Brendan Lieutenant Jacobs, to Christian's above as well. Guys, say hello. Everyone wave hi to the lovely people. Oh, my bad. On another episode of Alex Screws Up, he forgot to increase the volume on Skype. Hey. Everyone say hi.
Where would we be?
Yeah, where would we be with that, right?
A technical difficulty.
Hello, welcome to another episode of Retake, where Alex messes his technical difficulties. Hooray! I'm a professional. So I'd like to, guys, say hello one more time. Hi.
Hi there.
All right. So I'd like to move into our first segment for the night. We're going to moving on to the news. We're going to be talking about there's a bunch of stuff in the news this week. Most specifically, we're going to be talking about we're looking at the patch 7.3 has now moved into the LCS with big nerfs to Camille, Ivern, Jace, Kha'Zix, LeBlanc, Malzahar, and Rengar. A long list of champions there that are pretty on that list of must ban or else bad things will happen. The next thing on the list is that we will be skipping over Week 6. Not skipping over it, but we will be taking a break from the LCS this week, as we are going to be moving on to the IEM Katowice this week, which will be featuring teams from the EU LCS, the LMS, the LPL, and the LCK. Minus EDG, of course. They did have some visa issues and were not able to make IEM Katowice. We'd like to move on to our second topic for this evening, and that is the series of the week. We'd like to talk about our series of the week. We're all going to talk about our favorite best of threes from this week, and mine, of course, was the Unicorns of Love versus G2 Esports and TSM versus FlyQuest from NA. I'd like to start off with EU. Unicorns of Love versus G2, it didn't really turn out how I thought it would. I remember last week where I was talking up like how great both of these teams are and how amazing this team was going to be. But Unicorns of Love, it seemed like they were just playing sloppy, and G2 was able to punish them at every turn. In Game 1, although Unicorns were able to secure first blood, G2 ran away with the early game by constantly pressuring Poppy in the top lane, making sure she wasn't able to be teleporting, and using the high mobility of Tahm Kench in order to find kills all over the map and slowly cement a lead. G2 continued to do G2 things as they played their great macro game, and by valuing and fighting for dragons, constantly forcing team fights around Baron until they finally gained the buff and using that to carry them to victory. The second game was a little bit more even. Both teams were playing very well throughout. Unicorns of Love were able to play their game once mid-game started, and were able to pick up Baron at 20 minutes. They were able to continue to use their lead to take turrets and dragons, and everything was looking great. Everything was looking so good, and they were going to win the game. And then they were like, okay, guys, this is what's going to happen. Exile, he's going to realm warp us into the base, and this Chachi, he's going to teleport to a ward that we placed earlier. They don't have any turrets. They're not going to be able to see it. Exile realm warps too far away from the Nexus and was able to have an entire Rumble ultimate placed on top of the exit, and Chachi was the only one hitting the Nexus, and with not all five members hitting the Nexus, G2 was able to defend the Nexus even with a sliver of health left, run up the mid lane and end the game. And it was just the most upsetting way for that series to end. I would have loved to see a Game 3, to be completely honest with you. If UL was able to get Nexus pick, that would have been the craziest thing. But
yeah, the top two teams.
Yeah. The second game I'd like to talk about was the battle for second place, TSM versus FlyQuest. It was a series that kind of upset me. It upset me because I'm a FlyQuest fan, and just watching them go 0-2 this week was relatively upsetting, but it was still a fun series to watch. FlyQuest's macro game was still very strong throughout all three games, and making trades where they could find and sticking to as many safe strats as they can find. TSM just bullied and out-aggressed them is what I think is mostly a good I could just continue. I was looking for a word and I couldn't find it, but that's fine. Game 1, I was a little yeah. Oh my god, all the time. Game 1, I was a little unimpressed by Moon's Shaco. For a character that is labeled an assassin and has a lot of kill pressure early, being able to take Ignite and having lots of solid base damages, he had no kills in the first 20 minutes, while Svenskeren was making successful ganks all over the map. And, you know, through that lead, Svenskeren and TSM was able to snowball and continue. Game 2, as much as I love FlyQuest, I feel like they shouldn't have won that game. But when TSM was just like, hey man, great idea. Let's kill Balls by himself, and then we'll be able to go to the victory. Like, yeah, dude, that sounds like a great idea. So Svenskeren and Hanser are fighting Nautilus. Meanwhile, the rest of FlyQuest decide to run it up mid lane and end the game. TSM just playing very sloppy at the end there, throwing away the game to FlyQuest there. Like, they shouldn't have overestimated their abilities there, and it just ran away with the game. Game 3, TSM started off with a significant gold lead around 12 minutes and was able to just ride that to the victory. You look at graphs for gold charts, and it just 12 minutes, like, it's a little up in terms of FlyQuest, and then 12 minutes happens, and you're like, oh dear lord. It's just a constant line going downwards towards TSM, and they were able to just run away with that game as well. Christian, I believe you had a couple different games you wanted to talk about.
I did. This actually was a weekend for just amazing games across the board. But to keep with the parallelism, I'll start with my EU series, which was the series that followed G2 versus Unicorns, which was Fnatic versus Splice. And it's really, really, really hard to be a Fnatic fan these days, and I'm also a Team Liquid fan, so before you ask, yes, I do drink myself to sleep every night. This cup has Everclear in it, fun fact. But it's weird. Fnatic, they've been doing this thing where game 1, they look like SKT versus like Kiwi Kid times 5 for game 1, just like flawless, no mistakes, a complete stomp. And then they just fall apart the next 2 games. It happened against Splice. It happened against Vitality, which, I mean, they did win the series. It happened against, I think, one more series. But they do really well for game 1, and you think it's just going to be a clean 2-0, and then they fall apart, and it's ridiculous. And I blame Nico, the Pico. I mean, I don't know Fnatic, but their drafts have been atrocious. You know, we know Caps is this really aggressive player. Why is he on Malzahar, who can't be aggressive in lane, really? And then why was Soaz on Kled game 3 when Gnar was open, and Gnar does perfectly fine into Rumble? I think that was the better pick. I mean, Fnatic could have won game 3. Soaz did tunnel vision a little too far in one of the mid-game fights, and Splice regained map control, and they just kind of little by little pushed their way to victory.
Right.
Over in America, or I guess here in America, I have to go with the other TSM series, which was Cloud9 versus TSM, which, you know, that's the new rivalry. TSM versus CLG, that's so Season 4 now. It's at this point. TSM Cloud9, that's the rivalry, and you know, it showed in this series. It was a 3-game series, a lot of really close games, a lot of big plays. I did not like Reaper his drafts this series, especially game 3. Game 2, TSM, they picked this very greedy, this all damage comp with the Rumble and Kha'Zix, and basically no CC, you know, no huge tanks. And then game 3, C9 kind of did the same. They put Impact on Rumble, even though after game 2, Scar had mentioned on the analyst desk that Hanser's Rumble, I think he went like 0-7 or something absurd, was one of the worst competitive Rumbles he's ever seen. And then Impact was like, hold my beer, I got this, and then fed. Just fed. It was very greedy, and TSM just capitalized on the very greedy comp and took the 2-1, and now they are tied for first place with Cloud9, actually.
Yep. And it's definitely an impressive week for TSM.
Yeah, 4-0 against 2 very tough teams.
Yeah. Brendan, you had another couple of games you wanted. Yeah. It's all right.
Now, I was going to pick the C9 versus TSM game. I did think that Impact was fairly unimpactful in both series, but I want to actually switch it over to a more surprising series. P1 versus C9.
Yes.
As a replacement jungler, Meteos coming back, has to face his old team for the second series for this week. It was a big question of how he would do, but going 2-0 against Cloud9 is not something I expected at all.
Yeah.
And Meteos did a really good job. And I mean, the other game that P1 had this week against Envy was a good warm-up, I guess. But it was a great series for P1. As for the EU, I also didn't manage to see many of their games, but I did get to see G2 versus UOL. And wow, those two games, they were in themselves both very dramatically different games, as G2 swept UOL very cleanly in the first game. And the second game, they almost seemed too confident with some of their calls, giving up the Baron that allowed UOL to push into the base and almost take it. Yeah. If it wasn't for a quadra kill for Sven and an ace to secure their Nexus with one hit remaining on it, that could have gone to game 3, and anybody could have won it, but G2 managed to pull it out.
Yep. And with that, we'd like to move on to our next segment. We'd like to talk about interesting picks. We always see pros trying to counter the meta with their oddball picks. We're going to go through what picks this week had us excited or made us go, really? Huh? Really? All right. So with that, I'd like to talk about the man very dear to my heart because of all of his weird picks. The reason that I think that this segment still gets some content in it is Wonder, because he always has something weird to bring out. And this week, he was picking Singed, and I'm not the biggest fan of Singed because, to be fair, right now his teleport plays are like okay, but like if he's like proxy farming and like denying like experience from the opponent, then he's doing really good for himself. But like I'm still not convinced, but he did win. I'm not gonna like really just shit on his Singed play, because he did end up winning that game. So maybe I'm wrong, but I'm not a super sold on the Singed pick, but it's still interesting for him to bring that stuff out. Christian, what did you think this week?
I've been digging the recent Renekton pickups. It started over in LCK, and Expect picked it up game 1 for the G2 vs Unicorn series, and it kind of makes sense why he's seeing play. Aside from like the Poppy nerfs and some of the other tank nerfs, he's basically a strong early presence, and he's really hard to dive, and that's kind of what you need. The idea, to my knowledge, is pick Renekton with a bot lane that can push, take your jungler, dive the bot lane, take the turret, and then, recall, send your bot lane top, and then take that turret. Usually what happens when you dive the bot lane is the other team dives your top lane and then tries to, mirror the turret taking. But Renekton is very hard to dive. He has the Dominus, which is a huge surge of health. He has 2 dashes. He has the point and click stun. He has the Cull of the Meek, which heals him. More depending on how many people he hits, so the more the merrier up top. So it makes a lot of sense. Plus he has he has the same early damage that he always had. He still pushes very hard if he wants to, so right. I like the pick. I think we'll see him a little more, but maybe not. It's too early to say.
Right. I think another thing that's important to notice about Renekton is that since he pushes like waves really easily, if you send your top laner down to a bot lane in order to counter a gank or to punish a super greedy push, Renekton is going to run away with that top lane just because, he can clear waves and does a lot of damage to turrets.
He also builds lethality, which is a pretty big too. Lethality is pretty OP right now.
Yeah, I agree.
To be fair, everyone builds lethality. I'm pretty sure like Nami support at this point builds it.
I mean, I wouldn't be surprised.
Edge of Night is just that good. Like, come on.
You mean I get Banshee's Veil and a lot of damage? Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
Brendan, why don't you tell me about... Yeah, go ahead.
For me, As you bring up the Singed, I have to say, as a Polar Bear fan, I like Singed. We have the flip synergy, but for me, it's more of the surprisingness of Gragas being seen as a tank in the top lane. I think it's a strange pick because I don't think he's that useful as a tank. Yes, I understand his passive is a health percentage of your max health being gained back, but if you want a health tank, there's so many better options. Polar Bear has one, but the best health tank in the game, which still isn't being used, is Mundo, and he's got the strongest health regen in the game. I don't know why you're picking Gragas over that, especially if you want an armor tank or a shield tank like Nautilus and Poppy. I know in some of the games that Gragas was picked, there was a Poppy still available, so it's a little bit of a question pick. Other than that, I did see, and I think it was TSM pull out a Kled, and I think it was victorious. So that was a really fun pick to see. And it was, if I remember, if it was TSM versus C9, it was Kled into, no, I think it was against P1 because it was Kled against Fiora, and it was Ray going in. And I think Kled did a really good job, and the player for P1, don't remember who it is, did a very good job.
Right. And with that, we are going to move on to our next segment. And this is near and dear to a lot of our students' hearts, as you know.
It's your favorite.
It's my favorite, you know, just because I get to be a little bit dramatic.
To describe, at least.
You don't get as good as a grade on your test, and you need to go home and get it signed by your parents, and your parents just let out a little sigh and goes, "I'm not angry. I'm just disappointed." And we'll be discussing maybe a team, maybe a player, maybe a champion pick that made us just a little disappointed this week. And my disappointment is on a rather large scale this week, and I'm rather disappointed in the changes in patch 7.3. We saw so many nerfs to so many champions that were at the top of the list. These guys have to be banned or else you will lose. And now it's not you have to ban them or you lose. It's just maybe you ban them or maybe you let them through. But otherwise, they're still no matter what you do, they're still very powerful because of the itemization or even because of the role that they play inside the meta right now. We didn't see too many big shakeups. We didn't see too many big changes in terms of like champion picks. We talked about the Renekton pick that started to come out, but you know, he only saw play in like a few games, and especially in the LCS, the NA and EU, and you know, not a lot of support changes. Even though Malzahar was nerfed, we didn't see a lot of AD carry changes. It's still Jhin and Varus in the bot lane, and sometimes Ashe.
So boring.
So boring.
Mid lane is still, man, come on.
Yeah, mid lane is still relatively unchanged. Jungle is still relatively unchanged with Rek'Sai, Elise, Lee Sin, and sometimes Ivern and Rengar and Kha'Zix still being at the top, and the tanks are still incredibly powerful, and that's what I'm disappointed the most about. Hopefully, when we get to 7.4, that we actually see a change in the meta, because you know we've been seeing the same thing for almost multiple months now, and seeing at least somewhat of a big switch up should be good. Christian, why don't you talk to me about what you were most disappointed in this week?
I was definitely disappointed in Cloud9. They went 0-2 this week, and you know, they went from hero to zero. I assume it'll be temporary, but it just was a very disappointing week. Yes, they had a tough week playing TSM, who's tied with them in first now, and then P1, who's a top 3 team, but it was not C9's week. You know, sloppy drafts from Reapered, who, you know, typically has very good drafts, and then losing to P1, who didn't even have Anori. They had Mimios, the original Cloud9 jungler. Essentially what happened is, you know, what Kevin Durant and the Warriors have done to the Oklahoma City Thunder. If you follow basketball at all, you get that. If you don't, I'm sorry. But basically, Mimios, you know, performed very well without much practice at all. 2-0 Cloud9. I'm assuming they'll turn it around because they usually do. We'll see them in the finals versus TSM, of course, but they definitely did not perform at all how they have all split prior. So,
right, Brendan, why don't you tell us what your biggest disappointment was this week?
I mean, to give you my biggest disappointment, all I have to do is just, you know.
Oh, the chair. He's got the chair.
As a big fan of them, it's always disappointing to see them lose but to lose two series this week, and the second one, not even to what's considered the top 3 team going into the week, but losing to a P1 with Meteos as their jungler, to go 0-2 is just. I'm really disappointed.
But remember, for all those who are watching, who are a part of these teams, or maybe in some way, shape, or form, are fans, remember, we're not angry. We're just disappointed.
And we still love you.
We still love you.
Gosh. Cloud9 next week.
Yeah. And with that, we are going to talk about our next segment is What's Got Us Hyped? IEM Edition. Our next topic is going to be making predictions about the future. We're going to be talking about matches that you should watch in the coming week, and we're going to be making predictions about their outcomes. Now, it's going to be a little harder to make predictions about outcomes of certain matches this week because we are going into IEM, which is a tournament style, but we are just going to be talking about what we're excited about this coming tournament. IEM is definitely, I have to admit, I am a little less excited about IEM because, you know, we were promised C9, we were promised EDG, but, you know, with visa issues, we didn't really get to see EDG or Cloud9 at the tournament. But I still think this is going to be exciting, as almost all international tournaments are. I personally am excited to see how G2 performs against their international opponents. Their first game is against the first place team from LMS, which is Flash Wolves, who have proven to be in the past to be a very, very strong team in other international tournaments. So that should be really fun to watch. And that's like one of the first games. So you guys should totally check that out. I'm also excited to see Albus Nox Luna on the main stage once again. That is M19 now. And overall, I think that this tournament is going to be really, really fun to watch. I mean, the only downside is like the Korean teams showing up are lower on the standings in the LCK, but I think it's a little foolish to count them out. Christian, why don't you tell me what you're excited about for IEM?
I'm going bold. I am predicting a first and second place finish for Europe at Katowice. If G2 doesn't fall apart like they, you know, did at Worlds and MSI last year, I think they can take it over who I'm expecting to be the silver medalist in a rematch versus H2K. Yep. You know, you can never sleep on Flash Wolves, though. They always show up when it counts. Or, like you mentioned, the LCK teams, Rocks, Tigers, and Kongdu. But they are bottom 3 teams in LCK right now. And while they are Korean teams, you know, they could pull a Jin Air last year against CLG and lose, you know, just right off the bat and be donezo. And we also have the top 3 teams in Europe as it stands. So Unicorns of Love, H2K, and G2, of course. Yep. Just looking at the 2 groups, it seems that 3 of the 4 good teams there, the 3 being G2, Unicorns, and Flash Wolves, are all in Group B. And H2K is the lone good team in Group A. Right. Truthfully, I think H2K, you know, they're the 4th best team at the tournament unless Rocks, Tigers, or Kongdu really step up. But unfortunately, based on the brackets, they'll probably make it to the finals. And, I mean, that's similar to how they were at Worlds. I forget who they played in quarters, but it was one of the wild card teams. So they effectively had a free ride to semis for Worlds last year. Something similar, I assume, will happen for IEM Katowice this weekend. Right. But I do think G2 will bring home the bacon and make, you know, redeem themselves internationally. Right.
Brendan, why don't you tell me what you're excited about for IEM?
I'm going to actually go kind of the opposite of what you said. And my predictions are actually going to be Rocks in first. G2 will take second, but I don't think any more will place. I'm going to say Flash Wolves at third, and I really want to see Albus Nox as M19 take 4th place. That'd be really cool to see. But
that would be something.
As far as the competition goes, I think it's a good way for EU to test their mettle against the Eastern teams. Rocks and Flash Wolves both have shown really strong faces in global competition. And with 3 EU teams, it's going to be disappointing if none of them make it to finals. Right. Hong Kong Sports and Kongdu are new to me, but like I said before, I really want to see the former Albert Nock Luna. I'm excited to see if they pull something out big like they did in Worlds, getting to the quarterfinals.
Oh, that's who H2K played. Duh. Oh, man. Brain fart.
So
Albus Knox, everyone's favorite team.
yeah, they're under new management apparently, which is pretty cool.
Yeah.
I like them, so I'm excited.
Yeah, I definitely like them as well. With that, we are going to move on to our final segment of the night, our little rotating segment, our segment of the week, and this we're going to be talking about our most valuable player. With a little bit of a break in the action about LCS, I think it's time, especially since we're about midway through, I think it's time to look back and kind of look at some players who have very impressed us over the past weeks, and talk about our MVPs for each teams, or even just in general. I'd like to talk about a rookie to the LCS main stage and possibly the most swole dude to ever play League of Legends. It's Acadian. Arguably the best player on Echo Fox and partially responsible for Echo Fox's rise from the bottom to a very, very strong team. He has 67.9% kill participation, 62.5% first blood participation, a 60% win rate on his most played champion Kha'Zix, and sporting a 3.1 KDA. He is the most impactful, arguably the most impactful member of Echo Fox and one of my MVPs. MPVs. I don't know what that is. Not only is he a great league player, but he does give us free tickets to the gun show. And what my guests can't see is I have a tweet from Matt Hemmingbotham, Mr. Acadian himself, where he just
That's my name? Oh God.
Oh no, my phone's bugging out and made me take this mirror selfie where my arms are just huge, dude. Dude, what's wrong with my camera, dude?
His name though, Matt Higginbottom. Jeez, what a name.
I mean, I wouldn't go up to him and make fun of his name. I feel like he'd beat the crap out of me.
Nah, I got him.
All right. So Christian, why don't you tell me about your MVP so far for the LCS?
My current MVP is Expect, the top laner for G2. He has, cemented himself as one of the best top laners in Europe. I, for one, thought he was going to falter against Vizicachi, who, for, seasons now has been the staple of Unicorns and one of the best top laners in Europe. But he actually outperformed Vizicachi, which was very surprising. And he, confidently brought out the Renekton in game one. He was not afraid to try something new right off the bat, and he ended the game 6-0-5, which is very impressive. He was a bit of a liability last season with, he was new to the team, didn't speak English, but he's built up the chemistry. I'm assuming he's learned a reasonable amount of English, more like a conversational level. He has a reliable champion pool. He could play the Shen, the Maokai, the Rumble. He can play the Camille, so, you do still have to ban her 1,000% of the time, or you will lose.
Yeah, I agree.
But it is shown he has clearly improved, and it's shown in his very impressive 5.5 KDA and G2's currently undefeated record. They haven't lost a series in more than a year at this point, and Expect is definitely helping them achieve many victories against a lot of good teams.
Yeah. Brendan, why don't you tell me about your MVP so far
So,
for the LCS?
I think the start of the split MVP would have gone to Jensen, but as C9 did beat TSM the first week, but I think it's the return of the king, Bjergsen.
The other Dane.
As TSM did come back this week and kind of destroy
both C9 teams.
Bjergsen
Yeah.
out in the Orianna, getting an ace, and going to beat two of the top two teams in the league. It's hard to say anybody else but him. And if you look at his stats as compared to the league average, the only person who's really consistently beating him is Jensen. And I think at this point for the rest of the split, it'd be interesting to see if he does return to form and keep his stats going up and beat Jensen by the end of the split.
Yeah. So is your MVP title like the WWE belt? If Jensen beats Bjergsen, does it go back to Jensen?
I think if the two teams face off in the finals and Jensen knocks off Bjergsen, Jensen gets it.
Okay.
But right now, I guess it is kind of that because I think Jensen was the best mid laner at the beginning of the split.
Okay.
And coming into this week, C9 looks shaky. TSM looks strong.
Right. That's fair. It's fair. Yeah. I totally get you. I'm just messing around. All right. And with that, that does it for today. I'd like to thank my guests, Brendan and Christian, for joining me today. If you liked our show, make sure to follow us on Twitch. You can also find us on Facebook, Electronic Gaming Federation, and Twitter at Official EGF, and YouTube, Electronic Gaming Federation. The links are all down below. From all of us here at EGF, I'd like to thank you for watching. You can join us next Monday at 9:30 Eastern Standard Time for another exciting episode. We'll definitely be talking about IEM, and we'll definitely be predicting week 6 of North American and EU LCS. So from all of us here at EGF, thanks for watching, and we'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye.
Thank you for watching. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. There we go.